One of the things that I've uncovered in my time helping churches in ministry is that a lot of churches aren't growing because they have a really bad visitor follow-up process. In this video, we're going to break down some of the things that we've learned over the years and help you come up with a system that will help your church visitors be stickier than ever. Let's do this. Well, hey guys, I'm Thomas Costello, and in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about how your church can build a better visitor follow-up process. I think the heart of this is it has to start with the idea that each and every visitor that you see at your church is not just a number, they're actually a gift from the Lord. And we have that kind of an idea about who we are reaching and who's walking in our doors. We really think of them as gifts. I think it puts us in a much better place to take this process seriously, and it affirms the need that we actually have to have a process that is going to help people take that next step. So as we talk about this, remember, it's not just about getting bigger numbers or just growing for growth's sake. This is about real souls and helping people take that next step in getting closer to Jesus. So the first step in any good visitor follow-up process is to gather their information. If you don't have people's information, you'll never be able to follow up with them and help them to take that next step. The first question that a lot of churches ask is, what information should I gather? And the answer to that is anything that you could see yourself using to actually contact your visitors. In most cases, this is going to mean gathering their names, their phone numbers, their email addresses. That's really all you need. As a general rule, we think it's best to keep your visitor follow-up cards simple. In fact, we've done a lot of testing of this here at ReachRight. The fewer questions we ask on a form, the more of those forms we're going to get filled out. And the same thing goes for your visitors. Now, for many churches, you might want to actually send them a physical card, so an address might be something you ask for, but just know that people are going to be reluctant to give you their address on their first visit. So that might lead to fewer cards being turned in. Now, as for how you collect this information, there's really 3 different ways to go. Number 1, you can do the old-fashioned pen and paper, having a traditional card that maybe you pass out to first-time visitors, or you have it in the seat pocket in front of people there, or you give it to people in their bulletins. And this is a good way. It's actually really consistent, and when people have a physical card, we found that these are the most likely to be turned in. Secondly, you can do an online form, and there's a few ways to do this. You can have someone maybe text a number and you'll send them a link to that form. I know a lot of church management softwares offer that kind of functionality. Or even easier for a lot of churches is you can have a really simple domain name like yourchurch.com/connect. Or even better, you can have a slide that comes on when you're inviting your guests to fill out these forms, and it can have a QR code that they can take a scan of with their phone and get directed to a digital communications card. And I think third, and probably the best way to help get people's information, is to have people pre-register whenever possible. There's 2 primary ways that you can do this. Number 1, you can have a let us know you're coming form on your website. So when someone is browsing on your site, which most people do before they show up, they can get onto that form and they can let you know that they're coming ahead of time. And that way you can kind of prepare a way for them, save some seats, and make sure they have a really good experience. Alternatively, we've seen a lot of success with parents that want to pre-register their kids for kids ministry. And this is a great opportunity for your church to pull forward some of these forms and get their information before they ever show up. So whichever way you choose, it's really important that you gather people's information well. Now, one thing we need to say too is that if you want people to actually fill out these forms, you absolutely must incentivize them. Think about how you do things online. When you shop around on a website and someone says, hey, give us your email address for no reason, you're not really likely to do that. In most cases, you want to keep your information to yourself unless there's a real reason to give it to someone. So in most cases with a retailer online, they'll say, give us your information and we'll send you a coupon code, or we'll send you our weekly savings. Well, the same thing goes for your church. It's not enough just to say, hey, give us your information and we'll contact you, because in the end, who wants to be contacted just for contact's sake? You need to incentivize them. So maybe it's as simple as saying, hey, we want to get you some information on some of our ministries and how you can get connected. But I would advise you to go one step further and say, hey, we have a special gift for you that we want to give give you if you fill out this card or you fill it out online. Let us know at the Welcome Center at the back, and we're gonna give you a special gift. And that could be anything like a mug or some church swag. We find that chocolate and food does really well, but just give them some kind of a reason to give you that information. It'll help people get over that hump and start taking the next step. Once you have their information, the next step in the visitor follow-up process is to contact them using multiple channels. And the emphasis there is on the multiple channels. Now, I can't believe I have to say this, but once you have people's information, you do have to contact them. And I've worked with so many churches that as we discover this and we pull back the sheets and take a look at what's going on with their visitor follow-up process, we find they're getting information, but a lot of times the contacting part, that really falls through the cracks. Or if they do, they're just putting them onto the church email list and assuming everything is going to go well from there. Really, we find that it's best to have multiple channels that you're contacting your guests through. So to the question of should I email, should I call, should I text, should I send a card? The answer to that is yes. You should do all of those things. You should obviously email them, and this should be more than just being added to your church email list. You should do your best to send a personal email that is from the lead pastor of the church that thanks someone for being there. And if they had a chance to meet them, recall some of those things. If not, just say, hey, I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to meet you, and I hope we can connect sometime here in the near future. You should also make a phone call. I know this is something that's daunting, especially to some of our millennial and Gen Z audience, that the idea of receiving, or even worse, making a phone call to someone you haven't met before, that can be really scary. But the fact is that a lot of people still prefer that method of conversation, and this is definitely the most personal way to connect with someone after they've visited for the first time. So we recommend a phone call. We still think that's a valuable thing to do. You should also text. It used to be there was some hesitancy on whether it was appropriate to send someone a text or not, but I think sending a text message is really one of the most personal ways to connect with someone. And the great thing about texting is that it's very personal, but at the same time, it's something that can be really casual and short. So I think especially your younger audience, they're really gonna want to be texted as a result of giving you their number. And finally, if you got their address, it is always a good idea to send some kind of a card. Even better, we see some churches have a lot of success when they send a card with a gift. Maybe it's a gift card to a local coffee shop. It says something like, hey, have a drink on us here. That's just another way for you to be a blessing to people, and it helps to build goodwill in their minds towards your church. So you absolutely want to be contacting people with every form of contact that they gave you. They gave it to you for a reason, after all. Now, as for the question of who should reach out, I think at least one of these contacts should be from the lead pastor, or at least the person that gave the message in the service that the person attended there. Now, not all of them need to be this person, and I think it's even okay if someone else is helping the lead pastor in writing these contacts. If you're a large church and you see dozens of visitors every single week, well, it might be too much for a lead pastor to handle all of the ins and outs of the entire visitor follow-up process. But I think at a minimum, the email that comes first from the church, it will be helpful if that comes from your lead pastor. Studies have shown that people are most likely to get connected to a church because they feel some kind of a relationship with the lead pastor. So don't let that slip. And finally, when you contact them, you need to have some kind of a call to action. In most cases, after the first Sunday, there's two primary things. The first thing is come back next Sunday. That's the obvious one. And I think that's something that sometimes we overlook. We think that, well, yeah, they already know that we have church every Sunday, but that doesn't really substitute for a personal invitation. And that's a good habit for you to be in, is actually asking people to come back again. Maybe you highlight what you're going to be talking about in the next message and give them another invitation. But once you've invited them to a service, the next step is to invite them to a hosted meet and greet that you have at the church. Usually this is going to be right after church on a Sunday morning. Now, the purpose of this is just to make a connection with visitors, to connect visitors to the leaders within your church, so that when they come the next time, there'll be some kind of a friendly face and someone they get to connect with. This would be typically people that lead their ministries, think children's directors, youth pastors, worship leaders, and really anybody that's on the stage on Sunday morning. The main purpose of this is to have new people rub shoulders with people that are leaders within the church so that they feel comfortable when they come back the next Sunday. Having a food option will be a good incentive for them to come after service there. I would really limit the conversation to who the church is and then a little introduction from some of the key leaders within your church. Really, it's more about relationship than it is about education at this point here. Now, as you close out the meet and greet, you want to invite people to take yet another step, and that is the final step in our visitor follow-up process, and that's inviting people to a partnership class. This is the class where you're going to do more of a deep dive into who the church is. It might be an hour or two. It could happen on a Sunday morning, but more likely it might be something that happens in the middle of the week so people have the time and can make arrangements to really do a deep dive. Now, this class is not something you're going to be doing every week, and it's going to be different from church to church. If you're a large enough church, it might make sense to be having this class once a month so people can jump in at any point. If you're seeing 40 or 50 visitors every single week, you'll probably have enough people that want to take this class once every month. For most churches, it's going to be less than that, maybe once a quarter, but you probably don't want to do less than that if at all possible, because if someone is new and they come right after one of those classes just happened, it's already a hard ask to have them wait 12 weeks. Imagine doing it for 6 months or a year. That's probably just too much. So you'll want to do these at least once a quarter. And in these classes, it's really a deep dive into who you are as a church, what you believe, and an invitation for people to jump into the full life at your church. Again, in this meeting, what your goal is to give a little bit of the history of the church, continue to introduce a little bit more of the stories of some of your leaders there, and then help people understand what does it mean to be a fully committed member of this church. In most cases, that's going to be something to the effect of, we go on Sundays to our worship services, we're involved with something during the week, whether it be small groups or Sunday school or midweek services at your church. We have a place of service within our church, so we give back and we volunteer. And finally, we take responsibility for the finances of our church and we invite people to give. These are the 4 primary things that in most churches you want to invite people to commit to, and this is the place to do that. Now, some churches will have people sign something, a form or a book, but that's not necessary if your tradition doesn't require it. But in the end, it's important to ask people to make some kind of a commitment. Remember, Jesus says you have not because you ask not. And while he's talking about prayer there, I think this applies here as well too. From there, we can invite people to make that commitment, and at that point, they're fully committed members of your church. Now, in my experience, you get what you put into this kind of a system. And I've seen so many churches that have a system or a part of a system, but it doesn't really work unless you work it. I encourage you, if you want to take on these 4 steps, the next step for you is to actually have a meeting and find the people that are going to come alongside you to help implement this. And then here's really the key. Write it down. Make sure you know specifically what we're going to do. Put those dates on the calendar and get ready to do that. If you actually work this system, it is proven to work for churches. This 4-step process will help your church have visitors stickier than ever. I hope this video has been helpful to you. If it has, it would mean so much to me if you would like and subscribe to this channel here. We put out new content just about every week here at Reach Right that's dedicated to helping your church reach more people and grow. We'll see you next time.